Welcome to the course on medical law. This lecture will be about penalties for non-compliance. The concepts covered in this lecture are necessity of regulatory compliance, regulatory authorities in India, which are the Central Drug Standards Control Organization, the Indian Council of Medical Research, the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories NABL, and the penalties for non-compliance under the specific laws. So, this lecture will be covering the penalties for non-compliance with the diagnostic regulations. The keywords of this lecture are standardization, accreditation, testing and calibration, quality management system, regulatory compliance and penalties. All sectors including medical laboratories are required to comply with regulatory standards. Regulatory compliance serves to foster accreditation, adherence to legal requirements, ethical considerations and enhancement of patient safety. Non-compliance with the health sector regulations is an essential aspect that warrants careful consideration since it carries significant implications such as imposition of fines, legal repercussions and other sanctions. In the previous lecture, we have already seen the regulatory framework with regard to diagnostic laboratories. In this lecture, we are going to see the punishments in case of non-compliance with the regulatory requirements. In the healthcare sector, there are a lot of legislations which provides the framework of regulatory requirements. Now, let us see why there is a necessity of regulatory compliance in the healthcare sector. There are several imperative justifications for the necessity of regulatory compliance in medical laboratories. First is quality assurance. Ensuring adherence to regulations ensures that the laboratory produces accurate, reliable and uniform outcome for both the patients and the medical practitioners. The quality of diagnostics is a very important requirement. Ensuring of the quality will lead to overall improvement of the healthcare system, but inaccurate results after diagnostics may lead to failure in following appropriate treatment methods and will be detrimental to the interest of the patient. Testing. Third is legal compliance. There are a number of laws pertaining to data security, health and safety and medical equipment which must be followed by the medical laboratories. It is essential to abide by these regulations in order to prevent fines, penalties and other consequences. Fourth one is medical ethics. Medical laboratories regularly examine human samples and deals with sensitive patient data, raising ethical concerns. Maintaining the public's trust and confidence requires adhering to ethical guidelines pertaining to informed consent and patient confidentiality. Next is accreditation. Many laboratories apply for accreditation from outside agencies to demonstrate that they adhere to quality standards and laws. Gaining accreditation can help the laboratory to increase the revenue, attract more consumers and enhance its reputation. There are three important regulatory authorities in India in the healthcare sector. The first one is Central Drug Standards Control Organization or the CDSCO. Second one is Indian Council of Medical Research, which is the ICMR. Third one is the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories, which is NABL. The CDSCO serves as the principal regulating authority for medical devices within the jurisdiction of India. CDSCO is tasked with the responsibility of supervising the importation, production, commercialization and dissemination of medical devices in the country. The CDSCO is responsible for ensuring that medical devices adhere to the established safety, quality and efficacy criteria prescribed under the regulations. They also carries out inspections and audits in order to verify the adherence of medical device firms to standards pertaining to safety, quality and efficacy. Additionally, they offer direction regarding the procedure of approval and the prerequisite for distinct categories of products. So, CDSCO or the Central Drug Standard Control Organization is tasked with the responsibility to ensure the quality of medical devices. So, they are empowered to check the medical devices, give prescribed standards and ensure compliance with the standards. They are legally empowered to carry out inspections and audits in order to ensure that the manufacturers of medical devices are adhering to the quality standards prescribed under the regulations. The medical device manufacturers are required to acquire a license from the Central Drug Standard Control Organization or the CDSCO. An online registration portal is maintained by the CDSCO for this purpose. The online portal facilitates the submission of applications by the manufacturers for registration of the medical equipment, thereby enhancing efficacy of the registration process. So, any manufacturer of medical device in India or any company that is importing the medical device for sale in India must have to take the license from the CDSCO. The application has to be submitted to CDSCO through their online registration portal. So, operating the business of medical devices without taking the license from the CDSCO is a punishable offence. The Indian Council of Medical Research is located in New Delhi, serves as the preeminent institution in India responsible for development, coordination and advancement of biomedical research. ICMR stands as one of the most important medical research organization at the global level. The objective of the ICMR is to strive towards the improvement of public health and the wellness among the Indian population. The research priorities of the Indian Council for Medical Research align with the national health priorities of the government. It encompasses different fields like 1. The control and management of communicable diseases. So, the control and management of communicable diseases is a priority with regard to public health. So, the government has to ensure that the communicable diseases are controlled and managed in a proper manner. So, ICMR plays a significant role in this respect. Second one is fertility control and the third one is maternal and child health. So, with regard to maternity health, child health and fertility control, the ICMR plays a significant role by prescribing standards and ensuring that the policies of the government are implemented in a proper manner. Another responsibility is with regard to control of nutritional disorders. ICMR comes out with different plans and policies to control nutritional disorders. In the past, there have been several nutritional disorders which have been affecting the Indian population stuck with poverty. But due to the various policies and actions taken by the government, now the scenario has improved much. Another responsibility is development of alternative strategies for healthcare delivery. There are established channels for delivering healthcare. Development of alternative strategies is also a responsibility of the Indian Council for Medical Research. Another responsibility is containment of environmental occupational health problems within safety limits. ICMR also plays significant role with regard to management of non-communicable diseases, mental health research and drug research. Overall, ICMR plays a overarching role with regard to development and implementation of policies in the public health sector in India. The Indian Council of Medical Research has undergone significant transformation from its previous designation as IRFA. The ICMR is also responsible for hosting the Clinical Trials Registry India. CTRI is an online portal which ensures that all the clinical trials conducted in India are prospectively registered, that is before the enrollment of the first participant. So, for all the clinical trials that are conducted in India, a prior registration has to be obtained through the Clinical Trials Registry India portal. This is an online portal which is managed by ICMR. The registration has to be obtained before the enrollment of the first participant. Another important regulatory body in India is the NABL. NABL is an independent organization operating under the supervision of the Department of Science and Technology of the Government of India. The primary objective of NABL is to grant accreditation to clinical laboratories in the country for their testing and calibration activities. The sole accreditation agency approved by the Government of India is responsible for conducting third-party assessments of the quality and technical competency of laboratories. So, the laboratories has to be tested and approved by accreditation agencies. NABL establishes connection with Asia Pacific Laboratory Accreditation Corporation and the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation by means of sharing links. NABL also plays a crucial role in fostering trust and ensuring high quality standards in the laboratories by assessing their competence. NABL offers accreditation in various significant areas of science and engineering, including biological, chemical, electrical, electronics, mechanical fields, etc. Accreditation is a formal acknowledgement of the healthcare organization's adherence to established standards, which is substantiated by an impartial external evaluation of the organization's performance with regard to these standards. Now, let us see what are the penalties for non-compliance under the specific laws. Let us start with the medical device rules. All the manufacturers or importers of medical devices across all classifications are obligated to undergo compulsory registration for their medical equipment with the Drug Controller General of India or the DGCI. In the event that a producer or an importer fails to secure the necessary registration, they will not be able to distribute their medical equipment within the Indian market. This means that if the medical equipment is falling within the classification prescribed under the medical device rules of 2017, they have to obtain compulsory registration from the Drug Controller General of India. The registration process is considered complete only once the individual has obtained the registration number. It is imperative for all manufacturers and importers to prominently exhibit the registration number on the label of their products. So, the registration number obtained from the drug controller must be fixed on the label of the product. After the manufacturer or the importer completes the registration process, they are required to adhere with the quality management system for strict compliance. In the event the Drug Controller General of India identifies any instances of non-compliance with the quality management system, it possesses authority to suspend or revoke the registration. The Central Licensing Authority is responsible for the authentication of the papers and the examination of quality and safety of the medical device classifications in response to instances of failure or in case of any complaint. If the registered manufacturer or the importer fail to adhere to any provision of the medical device rules, the clinical laboratory accreditation provides them with an opportunity to present their written explanation as to why their registration should not be cancelled. Upon receiving the explanation, the CLA has the authority to either cancel or suspend the registration either in entirety or in relation to any medical device which is having an identified failure. Apart from the medical device rules, there are also penalties prescribed under the Clinical Establishments Act of 2010. The Clinical Establishment Act of 2010 mandates that any clinical establishment has to get registration. So, operating a clinical establishment without registration is prohibited under the Clinical Establishment Act of 2010. However, it has to be noted that this act is applicable to only very selected states. Apart from the central act, many states have chosen to enact their own state legislations to provide for registration of clinics. So, in such case, the clinics operating in that state will have to comply with the state legislation. Under the Clinical Establishment Act of 2010, a financial penalty will be assessed if the clinical establishment is operating without registration. For the first contravention, a maximum penalty of 50,000 rupees will be imposed. For a second contravention, a maximum penalty up to 2 lakh rupees will be imposed. Any further violation may result in fine up to 5 lakh rupees. If the clinical establishment fails to pay the fine, then they will have to face the legal consequences. The district administration has the authority to recover the amount from the clinic and also can close down the clinical establishment. If the party wants to file an appeal, they can file an appeal against the orders issued by the registering authority. Apart from the Clinical Establishment Registration and Regulation Act of 2010, the clinics operating in the state also have to follow the shops and establishment law. Each state may have a shop and establishment legislation which requires prior registration for operating a business establishment. The penalties prescribed by the Shops and Establishment Act differ among the states. It may consist of monetary or operational consequences, and some states also provide for imprisonment in case the establishment is operating without license. Although the monetary values are substantial, the possibility of receiving a closure notice due to non-compliance also exists in case of violation of shops and establishment law. Apart from all the other legislations that we discussed till now, the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Prohibition of Sex Selection Act of 1994 is also providing some penalties. We have to notice that the 1994 Act, the original enactment, was subsequently amended in 2003 to enhance the penalties and also change the name of the legislation. The section 22 to 26 of the 1994 legislation provides penalties for the contravention of the provisions of the Act. Section 22 explicitly forbids promotion or marketing of any clinic, laboratory or similar establishment that is engaged in the practice of radiology, imaging technique or any other procedure associated with the facility of determining the sex or sex selection of the fetus before the birth. Violation of the provisions of this section will result in penalties which includes imprisonment up to 3 years and also fine up to 10,000 rupees. So, as you can see, this is a very serious offence under the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act of 1994. So, the clinics who are operating or providing services with regard to diagnostics shall not do any promotion or marketing which advertises that they are engaged in the activity of providing sex determination or sex selection. In such cases, it will amount to a violation of this act and is punishable with imprisonment and fine. Section 23 of the Act pertains to actions of gynecologists, medical practitioners, owners of genetic laboratories, counseling centers, clinics and employees of such establishment who provide professional or technical services. If any of these individuals violate any provisions outlined in the legislation, then they will be subject to imprisonment up to 3 years and fine up to 10,000 rupees. Upon further conviction, the penalty will escalate to 5 years of imprisonment and fine up to 50,000 rupees. So, apart from operation of the clinical establishment, any person who is working in the clinical establishment will also be personally liable under section 23 of this legislation. So, that means any gynecologist, medical practitioner or any employee who is working in the clinical establishment which is providing the diagnostic services with regard to sex selection or sex determination will be punished with an imprisonment up to 3 years at the first instance, and on second conviction imprisonment up to 5 years. Additionally, the relevant authority may notify the State Medical Council the name of the medical person involved in the contravention. The purpose is to take appropriate action, including suspension of registration if the charges are established. According to section 23 of the Act, if any person, including the husband or relatives, is found guilty of forcing a pregnant woman to undertake any prenatal diagnostics which is prohibited under the Act, they may face jail sentence up to 3 years and a fine up to 50,000 rupees. Upon the subsequent conviction, the individual may face imprisonment up to 5 years and fine up to 1 lakh rupees. So, this means that if any husband or any relative or any other person who forces a pregnant woman to do sex determination or sex selection of the fetus will be punished under section 23 of the legislation. Section 26 pertains to transgressions made by companies, whether done with awareness or carelessness. If the offences is committed by a company with the approval of an individual who is in charge of the company's management, then the person will be held accountable and penalized appropriately. To conclude, in order to obtain comparability, standardization of diagnostic techniques is essential. The primary objective of the regulations are twofold. Firstly, to mitigate the problem of inaccurate diagnosis, which is a very serious issue, and secondly, to ensure quality treatment to the patients. The stringent penalties provided under these various legislations ensure that the diagnostic laboratories and the clinical establishments adhere to the quality standards and conditions prescribed by the regulatory bodies. The references of this lecture can be seen here. Thank you very much for listening to the lecture. I hope you are enjoying the course.